We want to welcome you to this session, Managing the Green Infrastructure in the City, a Commitment for Public Health and Biodiversity. This session is sponsored by Play Club, and Fran Bergua participates, President of the Spanish Association for Parks and Gardens. We do remind you that this session will be recorded. You can look it up on Connection ANPR and on the online community for WU Parks. Welcome. Hello, good morning. Thank you very much. If you don't mind to be a little closer to you, I'm going to leave this microphone. If at some point you can't hear very well, because I hear myself, no problem. You can tell me and let me know. And I'll come back up here to the podium. Okay? So, first of all, I have two sessions. You will excuse me that I participated a while ago. And now with this talk, which, as my colleague was saying, it's more about what my professional work actually is, in this case, in the municipality of Zaragoza, a city in Spain, as you can imagine. Okay, Zaragoza, for you to have an idea, is the fifth largest city in Spain, 680,000 inhabitants. This is its location within Europe and within Spain, on the northern side of Spain, and a very iconic image, Basilica del Pilar. I imagine all of you would be able to identify the Del Pilar festivities precisely in Zaragoza. Well, I'm not here to talk about the basilica, cathedrals, or virgins, but what you see here, scientific evidences that show the need to implant policies for the nurturing of urban biodiversity for its clear relationship with public health and mitigation effects on climate change. It almost seems like they prepared it for this situation that we are in. This is important because although I am going to talk about green areas and parks, this is a very important topic with what we are doing in Zaragoza, and if you allow me, in Spain, and therefore in contemporary cities that we know. One study has concluded that living near parks and gardens reduces the risk of breast cancer. Urban green spaces favor mental well-being. This is information taken from the communication of the press or the media. This evidences that value that is real that green areas contribute. The world grows in the cities. Excuse the reference I make to Europe, but with that scenario, you'll know the media is conveying this message of the way that cities are behaving in the effects in those places where people live. We are now going to see a series of images, very landscapey images, cemeteries, very poetic, very entertaining, very playful, but they also reflect a reality that we can find in the parks of the cities. This is a social reality. Remember, as I was saying in my previous talk, if you were there, these are spaces for socialization, and that's not only poetic and playful in nature. But to center my talk, I do not intend to be cathedratic. I just want to expose a series of ideas and projects that we have in Zaragoza. We want to focus on the ODS, the famous Sustainable Development Objectives. Yes, I extract them and I signal those that are directly related to green areas. You can see them. I'm not going to bore you by reading them all. For that, they are on the screen. But for you to be able to identify the relationship that exists between the green spaces, infrastructure, that is not merely just an objective of sustainable development, but I would highlight that the green spaces can unfortunately not be the only solution facing the climatic crisis that we have, but it is true that they are a part of the solution. for cities and therefore for people who live in the cities and villages. And at this point, we are going to show a video. My friend Marcos will play the video that will help to understand the exposure that, or the presentation I will be giving. A healthy tree produces the same effect as refrigeration in 10 air conditioners. The price of living increases if you have a view to a garden. The price of living increases if you have a view overviewing the park or an open space. Also, if you have a surrounding with water around you. Green areas offer a more healthy environment for people. The view of green areas can shorten hospital stays. They can also give important savings. Children play more time in open air if there are parks with green areas next to them. This can stimulate the physical and social development of children. An only tree in an urban zone can filter and absorb nitrogen dioxide and the particles that a vehicle emits. We estimate that a hectare of forest can store 2 tons of CO2 every year. For the creation of gardens, the adequate selection of climate and vegetable species, together with efficient watering systems, this can create a water saving of about 40%. The total number of employees of national parks exceeds 4,000. All national parks saw the number of retail stores grow. Walking 40 minutes some days a week improves memory. Doing this in a year, the hippocampus would grow by 2%. Well, with this video created by our colleagues in Holland, I do want to relate it to the discourse that the mayor of Monterrey gave yesterday, a very good one, by the way, in this regards. With this video and the cute presentation, the philosophy we know, we're probably in agreement. In Spain, we say we have to come down from muses to the theater. This is what I'm going to try to convey. What is naturalizing? This is transform green areas with a management model oriented to favor the presence of natural processes. As I was saying, I'm not going to read it all, that would be absurd, but we do need to understand that in cities currently, although there are places where people live, it's necessary to re-naturalize them, not turn them into wild forests. Naturalization leads us to what is interconnecting that plotting of urban and territorial to improve 3 aspects that for me are key. 1 is as a response to the effects of climate change. Number 2, improving the well-being or the health of inhabitants. And 3, recovering biodiversity. Everything that is good for people, in a strict sense, goes through recovering biodiversity. What does this imply? Well, we need to look at green spaces, parks, gardens, boulevards. We have to see them in a different way, not as we need to recognize the biodiversity that they hold, not only for aesthetics, which is important as well, but also by the benefits that it creates for people, the ecosystem services that they offer. It sounds a very technical term. Well, how it benefits people, in other words. But of course, as the author would say, I'm here to talk about my book and to present. You could say at any moment, you can say, hey, Frank, if you have a question, feel free to do it. But I'm going to tell you the model that we are developing in Zaragoza, which is a model that I and the team that I participate with are developing in cities in favor of naturalization of cities. Urban naturalization that we intend to have in Zaragoza is a more ecological way of managing, but also, as I was saying, oriented to give a value to the ecosystem services, those benefits for humans. It sounds very good to say it, but the management is how do we develop that. It's not a specific project, it's a process. All projects contribute, all specific actions contribute, both the ones made from administrations as well as those that each city can make, but it's true that the responsibility in the context of Spain falls on the local administrations, on the city governments. They have that responsibility. They have to conserve and offer those parks and gardens to the citizens. Our conceptual project that I'm going to explain was called Natural Zaragoza, connecting the city through nature. And I'm not talking only about nature. It would sound like I'm developing a spoiler that the mayor made for me yesterday with, as I see, a very good discourse. So Zaragoza, I need to tell you a little bit about it. It has about 11 million square meters of green areas, about 16 meters per inhabitant, 3 rivers and a canal, 100 urban parks, more than 3,000 forest areas. This is not normal in Spain for the city to have more than 3,000 hectares of forests, but don't imagine a forest of the north of Europe. No. Zaragoza is a city with harsh weather, a lot of heat in the summer, a lot of cold in the winter. We have the Pyrenees mountains near us, but this is the area. So we have a series of images here to reflect. I was speaking to a colleague about the importance that is given to talk about the ecosystem services and benefits. That's not in any way competing with having the city as pretty as possible, right? Both to, as the mayor was saying, when you invite someone to your home, both for those who live there as for those who you are receiving, you want to have it looking nice. So that piece is about 5 meters tall, a contemporary figure of the Virgin of Pilar. Okay, so infrastructure, there's a whole series of data here. I would have no issue if we shared this slideshow with all of you in case you weren't able to take pictures. Since it can't be otherwise, there's nothing hidden there. I enable it with all trust, simply for you to see some numbers. Green is not just trees, parks, it's the exercise equipment and children's playgrounds. There's a whole series of elements that contextualize that infrastructure, the green infrastructure. But now I am getting into my topic. We need to evolve. I have said it before. We need to evolve from traditional to contemporary, from the gardens and parks to green infrastructure. We need to change the vision of parks and gardens as isolated systems and understand them as an interconnected, functional network that presents dynamics, processes potentiated by biodiversity. If we do not understand the city and its surroundings in this way, we will become very small. The objective of Zaragoza Natural is to connect the city through nature. That's a strategy that, as I was saying, is not a specific project. This doesn't have a due date. No, these are not 4-year programs. There are things that need to take their course. As I was saying, we need to give way to what's contemporary, not because the past was not good, it was very valuable, but as people and life, we must evolve. As I was saying, we are in climate emergency. There's something that we can do to collaborate or become more involved. Our health is involved here. Even though that's selfish, we can do that. Connecting the city through nature is creating a whole mesh of connections. We'll see how, because this sounds very philosophical, right? But how can it be done? And these connections materialize in a whole series of actions. Let's come bringing it down to earth, okay? The strategy, as I was saying, nature is present once again. It's not about saying the past was wrong, but it's time for management and design of cities, both for the parts that are consolidated as well as the newer parts. We need to rethink them on other codes, not as just for people, but a place to live and enjoy well-being. In the case of Zaragoza, we'll see a whole series of actions. I don't want to get too much in detail here, with a great project that we call the Forest of the Zaragozans. As I was saying, it's all about creating this network of connection. What's important is the interconnection, and all of these sections directed towards that. Those that are now or that in the future we might create. In this process, we did not come up with this from one day to the next. If I had to give some prescription or receipt, and this is just my opinion, you can decide what you do with it, no problem. The first thing I'd say is knowledge. Know what we have, what condition it's in, how much it's worth, because not everything is just words. We need to identify and measure our assets and have control to then be able to rethink or reinvent the green infrastructure in Zaragoza, as I was saying, from that diagnosis of space, optimizing resources to maximize the results and the achievement of objectives. Because I must also say, things cost money. So we are at times where it's required. Social needs are required, but these come along with cost. Solutions based on nature, managing, considering a whole series of inputs that are not only just trees or plants or flowers, but health, well-being, quality of life. How surprising. Managing in a more sustainable way, and I'll also say sometimes we magnify with words. We say there's good or bad management. Every good management is sustainable. How things are done, how resources are used, and if not, it's not sustainable. Sometimes we adorn this, but the point I wanted to get to, and that's fundamental, it's key, and one of the challenges, and again, I look to my friends from Argentina, co-creation processes and learning. All citizens are part of the problem and of the solution. So the issue is how we can manage this. Every moment, every place, every circumstance probably requires some different needs. In the mission and vision that we have, that we are developing, it's a change of paradigm. It's obvious. Cities generate dysfunctions environmental, psychological, social. There's a whole series of problems that result from a city, but the mission of green infrastructure, as I was saying, if we go beyond just merely the poetic dimension or entertainment dimension or aesthetics, it will minimize those dysfunctions that the city inevitably implies, because that's where people live. This is the change in paradigm that should sustain and mark our way, our path forward. And I'm going to present a prescription. No, actually I won't. I'll just tell you what we're doing, what has worked out well, what hasn't, why not. But every city, each city needs to develop their own path. Strengthening ecosystemic services. Planning infrastructure with an objective, improving the health of citizens. I say this, and sorry if I sound very passionate, I truly believe that that's how it works. In our case, as actions that maybe day after tomorrow I could offer some more. Look for healthy strolls. I'll explain what I mean by that. Here's a series of the ecosystem services that we offer. But we need to reach, as I was saying, those actions of Zaragoza Natural. And what does this man from the north of Spain have to tell us? 8 things that I want to go over now. 1. I don't know how we would say this. It would look like I'm trying to sell something to you, but it doesn't need to be the first, but this is important. An organizational structure according to the cultural change, in line with cultural change, to be able to optimize administrative resources. I've said it before, and I say it here now. I've said it a lot at every session I've had. I'm not a politician. I am a public servant. And I must acknowledge that sometimes we are expecting or complaining about political responsible people. They don't set out paths that we would understand, would help us understand what to do, when it turns out we as technicians have not set out on the table for them the alternatives for them to be able to decide for one. So in that regards, we also need to be self-critical. In this sense, in the case, I insist, this is only our case, okay? We had the habitual service of parks and gardens. I won't take too long explaining all the different departments that we have in Spain. Yes, we're all part of the city hall, but each department works on their own. So we had to integrate them under one denomination: parks, gardens, and green infrastructures. A very long name, but it's true. It is a statement of intention of what we wanted, with a series of fundamental aspects. We had to organize a service to get an idea. All the jobs, we have them contracted through companies. That's the formula that in 70% of Spain was developed. But this is the distribution of how it works to understand the projects, evidently in a special communication, coordination, and sometimes because we need to evangelize this with other departments that design the city. For example, urban development, infrastructure. The name changes depending on the city. And you heard me correctly. I said evangelize. That's how I feel we have to explain things to the people with the brick and mortar. I'm sorry if there are architects here and civil engineers. But in the sense that if we don't teach them a part that for different reasons they might not have learned, how will they know what this is about naturalization or ecosystem services? In my case, I'm a landscaping engineer, and I've had to understand this as well. Number 2. Adaptive management and functional for urban green towards the nurturing of biodiversity in ordinary management. Because there are tasks. We need to prune the trees, we need to rake the gardens, we need to treat plagues and diseases. That's what I mean by ordinary management. So what did we set out to propose in Zaragoza? Well, adjust all the management and design, administrative processes of green infrastructure to the specific needs based on the objectives of sustainable development and, as I was saying, facing climate change. So the starting point we need to define, we need to identify where we have it, establish a typology. By typology, we understand what we see here in the different colors, green and red. It's not political segmentation whatsoever. It's just the downtown area of Zaragoza. We have two contracts with two different companies, and here we distinguish what each of them do. But every street, every boulevard, even every park, not all of them are maintained or need to be maintained in the same way. They all need to comply with a series of objectives, but it would be absurd to do it all the same for all of them. And then requiring measurement. You need to do an effort. If I have mentioned that conservation and maintenance of green infrastructure in Spain is done by third parties or subcontracted, outsourced, we need to measure and calculate and budget absolutely everything, because the funds belong to the citizens. So we don't always have that. I've said before, 170,000 trees. 170,000 trees. Well, it changes every day when one falls down, but that's measured. These are very precise measurements. Also, assigning maintenance work. We'll see why. Not everything is so basic. We need to anticipate and then calculate the budget. In conservation, for you to get an idea, we're talking about the green parks, fountains, ponds, playground areas. This is how we have it distributed. We distinguish green, the more urban green, with the territorial, those 3,000 hectares of forest that I was saying, and with another series of contracts by specialization, because we understand that that's how performance is better. Also, I would highlight, we have here special centers for employment. I don't know what title you have for it here in Latin America, but reserved for people with disabilities. So we have decided in a very serious way, we're talking about 2.5 million euros a year, and they do a very good job with it, not only maintaining, but the social function is excellent. You can see the three fundamental aspects that we work on in conservation. The quality control. With no control, it's of no use, right? So we need to have control because we are handling these public resources. And for this, yes, I get along really well with the companies, but no, it needs to be with our information. As those who have children, we have to be on top of them. The key points here as far as management and conservation. The trees that are the spinal cord of green areas needs to be treated in a differential way. But I also say having in mind that it's part of a whole. At the end, all of this ends up being ecosystemic services. We talk only about trees. A while ago, a friend from Holland was saying CO2 is not measured by how many trunks we have. The trunks are not the ones that absorb CO2. It's the leaves. But that's not just trees, that's also shrubs, herbs, and not only the public green, it's also the private greens. And then knowledge and formation of the team. I'm not inventing anything here. Very important here. Associations play a very important role to do the lobbying so that companies and enterprises take care of the true actors, who are those workers that focus on design, strategy, how to reach a specific the point of gardening. You'll see it, and I repeat it several times. Whatever we don't know, we cannot improve. 3 out of 8. Management of trees as the spinal, the vertebrae for green areas. In this graph, this is what we have. There's a lot of work and follow-up. The forest of Zaragozans, biological control, biodiversity nurturing, for the experience of knowledge without another purpose or end than merely scientific. That's so important. And risk management for trees in this case. Maintenance work, basic maintenance integrated into the new management. I'm not going to read them because it will be as if I were throwing stones at you, but you can acknowledge that the philosophy that I'm sharing is truly translated into work with every one of these. And here they are not all present, but perhaps the ones I've wanted to evoke. You can see how effectively naturalization in this case developed in this city is possible. And it can be developed. Selecting the adequate species, we're speaking of trees in this case. First of all, what we need to ask ourselves is whether the space is adequate, because of course, and architects and engineers will say the paper backs it all, and if we give a higher number of trees, we're placing the tree at a meter away from the house, and they say, hey, you covered up my window, there's no air or light. And this happens, okay? So we have to rethink, and we need to keep these things in mind. The species, always that it's possible, planting with a species, there's a world specialist, as there are in Monterey, they will determine what are the most adequate species for different reasons. I'm not going to extend on that. Allergies and adaptation to climate. Evaluating based on different, it's a sampling. This is what we are doing, and it's translated. This is the replacement plan. We made inventory. 4,953 tree holes or spaces. The politician says, okay, trees are a fad right now, so let's not have any empty tree spaces. Okay, but we need to reflect what I was saying, and a proposal, technical proposal with the previous Zaragoza that has an important size already. We distribute it by the different district meetings that make up neighborhoods, and we identify the number of tree holes, but we also find which tree holes we need to close up, because otherwise those neighbors are going to come and say, you're putting another tree right here in front of my door, in front of my window, and each one of you will feel identified. Why does there have to be a tree on the pedestrian crossing? Can we not move it over aside? No, but I fixed the pavement to adapt the elimination of architectural barriers, and I put the tree right in the middle of a pedestrian crossing. This happens. So I see some smiles there. So we need to share what really happens, and we are the ones that have to suggest the changes. And so we have a whole series of species that we have used for Zaragoza. Again, it will sound like a joke, Excuse me, please. We talk a lot about the deficit of microchips, right? Have you heard about that? The scarcity of microchips because vehicles aren't made because they lack microchips? Well, I don't know about here, but in Europe, there is a scarcity of trees to be able to plant. Monumental scarcity of trees. Sometimes we forget that we've gone through 2 years of pandemic and plants aren't just born in the shelves of supermarkets. So we are suffering that deficit. Number 4, biological control that's conservative. What does this mean? Well, here you see to the right the background image iconic for us. This is a pillar, but to the left we see a tree hole with this little sign with its QR code. We'll see what they consist of. The reality is that there are beneficial insects, and you might say, okay, tell me which ones they are. We'll buy them as if they were a brigade. Yeah, no need to contract, but in each place they are different. What I mean by this is we treat plagues and diseases that happen because they're inherent to living beings in a way that doesn't force the use of chemical substances. And we need to coexist with them, and there's a lot more natural way of doing it. The photographs are real, they're not extracted from any book, they're the insects we have there. We let them go in our city 1 year, and they're not like the products that we have to renovate every year, but they take over the city, they live there, and they control the ones that create greater problems. In this way, we create what we denominate biodiversity refuges. All of these are real images of this year, and the information I'm offering here is to try to justify and motivate that it does correspond to trees, places that are, it's not random. Another topic, we need to accept change. How many iconic images have been seen in the pandemic? We could see a whole series of herbs and plants and we'd say, this is wonderful, but the city has not been working here. They came up wildly. Okay, then we don't need the service. Well, that was in the spring. Then it's August. I think, or summer comes along and dries up everything. Well, we need to do no longer evangelization, but pedagogy, and the citizens will understand it if explained. What a difference between these plants that are intentional and not just seasonal. These are refuges for biodiversity. They're not just plants. Besides, aesthetically, they look good. The importance for knowing what happens. It's not only about a pictorial situation. This is Lorena Square, one of the more well-known people in Spain. She's a biologist, and if we don't come up close, these pictures we see here, we would think they just come up by coincidence, but they are there and they control, let's say, the hostels or hotels where insects take refuge is down below. And then they come upstairs to control those insects that create problems in the treetops. These are living tree holes. And I insist, sometimes we have to zoom, like many times in life, come closer to see something that we hadn't seen before. If the media can echo this, this means we do a lot of things wrong, but some things Five, floral solutions for biodiversity. what I've said before about more wild solutions are not competing with other solutions where we can put in seasonal flowers. Those who are more gardeners, they change according to the season of the country twice a year, but it's like using and throwing out. Well, there are other solutions, very spectacular for landscaping, structures, colors, textures, but also they serve as those biodiversity refuges. They're more sustainable because in this way we only have to change 30% of the plants out. The rest are maintained. So although it seems like it costs more at the beginning, then it costs a lot less later on. 6, naturalization of spaces of opportunity. The forest of the Zaragozans. This is the great initiative that we have at a city level. We use a lot of these urban forests, and this is urban, suburban, and territorial. I've said it several times. Not only what we have next near home for the aesthetics, we are committed with climate change being more naturalized and resilient, contributing to the best functioning of the urban ecosystem and the health of people. The forest of Zaragozans
es un gran compromiso por la salud y la sostenibilidad. Tenemos 5 objetivos prioritarios. Mejorar nuestra salud.
improving health, increasing biodiversity, reducing the carbon footprint in Zaragoza, and avoiding global warming. Growing to be a greener city. We'll fill 1,100 soccer fields with trees. Using organic waste as compost. Contributing to the Sustainable Development Objectives. Participating in a great project. Together, we create a more sustainable future and a greener Zaragoza. A sustainable Zaragoza. What I was getting at with the video, if you got an idea, we'll see if we're truly developing this or not, because it was a spot. But here it's important to say we don't only do this as a city government of Zaragoza, but together with the Foundation of Ecology and Development, which has their home in Zaragoza and collaborates especially with Iberoamerica for the management of governance. It's not the imposition of a specific administration. In this sense, the project is especially collaborative. Public administrations, citizens. When I say public administrations, keep in mind that in Spain, not all administrations, local, have the same color. And sometimes a good project, let's say it's being supported independently or regardless of the political background. As I was saying, this is done in a collaborative way, and we're making new forest spaces, renaturalization of urban environment, mitigation of the heat island, job creations, and a calling to participation. This is fundamental. Marcos, let's see.
Entonces, solo había objetivos. Tan solo un año después,
This video, which is edited to the 1st of April, not even in a year, 5 months, they're real facts. I hope it doesn't sound presumptuous for my part, but we are very proud for what we are developing with this project, which is non-stop. I'm not going to bore you with all the data. As I said before, plants don't understand political mandates, but we do require the support and backup of governments at all times. But this forest of Zaragozans is extrapolated to any country or city, regardless of the political party. Our objective is 700,000 trees, one per inhabitant in Zaragoza. But that's the marketing title. What's important is that the waste, organic waste that we separate, can become compost, and we use it to improve new grounds that are very needed, especially the matter of co-creation, collaboration, participation with these sponsorships, that beyond just the financial contributions, we connect emotional connection between the person and the tree, and we are collaborating. I think that's what we can say, and we're very proud. Sustainable strolls. This is a new methodology that we are applying to transformations, very consolidated walks in Zaragoza, and more patrimonial. And we can do an analysis of gardening that there tends to be in those spaces, not from a dimension or perspective only of aesthetics or governmental, but also because of the benefits it generates. So for this, we need to measure things, know them, measure them, to then see which ones we should place, not place, take away. We have done this with a team of scientists led by Enrique Figueroa, a very well-known professor from the University of Sevilla. Here you can see a series of characteristic images of what that space was like some months back, practically a hectare of gardens. And here we can see we need to be patient, because the responsible people and citizens say, okay, you took plants out and now nothing grows. Yeah, you need to give some time for it to grow, right? It can't just come out overnight. But this is to show that we are working on it. Here there's a series of information so you can get an idea without going into detail on this action that is part of collectivity of that Zaragoza Natural. All that strategy of naturalization of the cities is possible with this project, with data-specific objectives that we aim for. We're going to make them with a change in the design and the selection. In fact, I would say in reconsidering these spaces, not only in vegetation selection, these are some of the images. I hope to get the opportunity to have a picture, and you can see how the plants grew to create this more comfortable space that could nurture the health of the citizens. This is for Zaragoza, and I think for any city. And the last one, but not least important, and it's not a coincidence that I left it for the end, connecting citizen with nature. I have said it in several occasions, it's of no use if I am the greatest engineer, architect, landscaper, if I forget that we are intervening for someone, for people. It's of no use. That's fundamental. In this sense, there are two very specific actions that I illustrate in these images: communication and citizen participation. There are different methods Not all of them have to be technological, but we do need to use all the media at our reach and even the tone that we say things in. Because we can all learn, even those of us who have been screwing up for years, like myself, we continue learning. And that's not competing with the dynamism of parks, which, as I see here in many areas of Latin America, so many activities are developed, some organized and some not. It's important, as we are seeing, what is not well known is not measured. We need to make the effort to get to know, and in a more familiar way, with teenagers, and sometimes it's as important to have maintenance activities of pruning and cleaning to more playful activities, so that the participation of citizens, especially the younger ones, who are more aware about this climate change than us older ones, for them to be receiving this message. So with this, I would just say thank you. For me, it has been a pleasure and joy to be able to come and share this talk with you, and in free times to listen and continue learning. You have my 2 email addresses, both the City Hall email address and Gmail, which is the one I use personally and as president of the Spanish Association of Parks and Green Areas. I don't know if we wrap up or if there's time for questions. Okay, well, thank you very much.